Tonight on a special edition of Politicat.
We cover the Russian invasion into Ukraine.
From Northwestern's campus.
I went on for almost 48 hours with just 2 hours of sleep because I was constantly monitoring the news.
Chicago's Ukrainian village.
Horrifying to be here while they have to spend the night in basements, hiding from missile attacks. That's terrifying.
And Washington, D.C.
Seen severe sanctions put against Russian elites and large banks, as well as a large outpouring of humanitarian aid.
Plus, we discuss the invasion live tonight in a panel with former U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Ian Kelly, and Northwestern political science professor, Karen Alter.
Those stories and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics
right now.
Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Jason Bieferman.
And I'm Chloe Cope.
Before we jump into tonight's coverage, we have Melina Halkia giving us an update on the situation in Ukraine right now. Melina?
The large-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine started last Thursday, February 24th. Ukraine's Ministry of Interior said on Sunday that 352 civilians have been killed since the invasion began. At least 14 of those were children, and another 1,684 people have been injured. Bombs have been going off in different parts of Ukraine, explosions heard from the capital of Kyiv, and satellite images showing a more than 40-mile-long Russian military convoy reaching the capital. On Tuesday, Russia continued targeting civilian areas in the east and south with increasingly powerful weapons, damaging major cities. More than 500,000 refugees have fled Ukraine, and countries around the world are racing to provide humanitarian aid. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Sunday that the United States will send nearly $54 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Now, several nations have also placed economic sanctions on Russia and sent military assistance to Ukraine, including ground and air defense capabilities.
Some of the most powerful impacts our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russians' access to finances and technology.
Now, Putin's aim is to protect Russian security from NATO's expansion and restore Soviet territory, reuniting Kyiv with Russia. New Jersey Representative Tom Malinowski said the invasion has everything to do with Putin's belief that Ukraine has no right to exist as an independent country. The very existence of Ukraine is offensive to him, and he wants to extinguish it. Back to you on the desk.
Thank you, Melina, for that update. Chloe?
Last month, Politicat talked to a Ukrainian student at Northwestern whose family was preparing contingency plans in case the Russians invaded.
Always have, 2 suitcases ready and a folder with all essential documents ready, if something happens so we can flee immediately.
As Politicat's Logan Skijano reports for us now, Svetinsky's worst fear has become reality.
It was just such a surreal and horrible feeling.
It was the moment McCormick Jr. Roman Svetinsky broke the news to his mother. War was on in Ukraine.
I went on for almost 48 hours with just 2 hours of sleep because I was constantly monitoring the news.
His mother fled to Poland. His grandparents remain in Lviv, the largest city in western Ukraine. Russia hasn't reached Lviv, but air raid sirens blare at the regular.
I'm just trying to keep in touch with them all the time. I'm calling them every hour. But yeah, you just feel kind of useless and powerless.
Hi there.
Ukrainians at Northwestern are raising money for an NGO supporting the Ukrainian army.
Having something to put our nervous energy towards and kind of our fear and anxiety towards something that's productive has been like a really rewarding experience.
Yesterday, the Ukrainian flag was painted on the rock. And from Friday to Monday, the group collected over $7,000. For Weinberg sophomore Valeria Ruhuza, their efforts mean so much more.
It helps to handle the emotions, and I feel like together we can make the difference.
One thing that students on both sides of the conflict made clear is that this is Vladimir Putin's war, and that the Russian government does not represent the will and beliefs of all its citizens.
Putin's government is responsible for war, but not ordinary Russians. It's been saddening to me to see that Russia is not seen as sort of a good country on the global scale.
With Russia encroaching Ukraine on three sides, Svetinsky has not given up.
We're 44 million people who are hating the Putin's army, hating Putin. I'm confident that we will win.
Logan joins us now. So Logan, how are the Ukrainian students planning to support their country?
Yeah, Chloe, well, they've really been focusing on two different charities since they've started their fundraising efforts last Friday. The first day, all of the proceeds, which was about $3,000, went to Come Back Alive. And since then, they've put the money towards Razom for Ukraine. Now, both of those organizations are helping soldiers in the Ukrainian army with medical aid, food, and other tactical supplies. And if students at Northwestern are looking to get involved, obviously they can contribute, but they can also follow NU_Ukraine on Instagram, where the group of Ukrainian students will be posting more about future meetings and fundraisers.
You spent a lot of time talking with these Ukrainian students over the last few days. Logan, how are they doing? What was it like talking to them?
You know, obviously, guys, it's a very emotional time for a lot of these students, as you would expect, and some of them weren't even ready to quite share their stories with us, which is totally understandable. But the best thing is that they're getting to know each other. A lot of them haven't met before, and it's good to see that they're helping each other heal and get through this very difficult time.
Thank you, Logan.
Chicago has the second largest Ukrainian population in the United States, and thousands of people gathered Sunday in Chicago's Ukrainian village protesting the Russian invasion. Politicat's Maria Heim reports.
USA, help Ukraine! USA!
Irina Davshik's entire family, including her husband, is in Ukraine.
I'm horrified, I'm terrified, and I'm scared.
Invasion started around 5 a.m., she called her family.
Wake up, like Russia has attacked.
Blue and yellow flags flying high in Chicago as Ukraine's Ministry of Interior reported on Sunday that at least 350 civilians have been killed.
They take civilian people like ours and they killed, just for nothing. They come in and killed.
Speakers including Mayor Lightfoot and Governor Pritzker stand in solidarity with Ukrainians.
I want to recognize the extraordinary bravery and resilience of the Ukrainian people.
A Northwestern professor shares his mother's story.
She was 6 years old when she saw the bombing of Kiev in 1941 by the Nazis. She's 87 years old and she witnesses the bombing of Kiev by the Russian troops.
Protesters demand stronger response and more supplies from Western countries.
We need actions now. We need to cut off Russia from the whole world.
We don't need just prayers. Yes, prayers are very helpful, but that's not the only thing we need right now.
Some fear the invasion is just the start of Putin's ambitions.
If Ukraine falls, it's not the end of his tyranny, it's the beginning.
Protesting for peace, for Politicat, I'm Maria Heim.
Protesters said that you can donate by scanning this QR code. These funds will directly help Ukraine purchase military equipment and supplies.
Tonight, President Joe Biden gives his State of the Union address, condemning Putin's invasion. Politicat's Vanessa Kjeldsen reports for us from Washington, D.C.
We can expect Biden's speechwriters were busy rewriting this past week after Russia invaded Ukraine. This past week, we've seen severe sanctions put against Russian elites and large banks, as well as a large outpouring of humanitarian aid and the threat of Article 5. Biden reminding Russia that if fighting were to spill into another NATO country, the U.S. will be there to support its NATO allies and fight back. Tonight at the State of the Union, as Jen Psaki noted in her press briefing yesterday, we can expect a focus on the potential harms to the American people from this Russian invasion, as well as the plans to mitigate those, such as inflation at the gas pump. Vanessa Kjeldsen, Washington, D.C.
The invasion of Ukraine is already having severe economic consequences for Russia, with Russian billionaires losing over $100 billion since the invasion and Russian banks being hit very hard by economic sanctions. However, there could also be economic impacts around the world, specifically with respect to oil prices. Politicat's Max Rothfeder is here to explain what that all means. Max?
Thanks, Jason. The United States and other Western countries have already imposed major sanctions on Russia's financial systems. The White House said in a statement that, quote, the sanctions imposed severe costs on Russia's largest financial institutions and will further isolate Russia from the global financial system. Western countries have been wary to sanction Russia's energy industry, at least so far. Oil and gas are 60% of Russia's exports and 39% of their federal budget revenue. So why don't Western countries target Russia's oil and gas? Well, the issue is energy dependence. Cutting off Russian oil supply could cause collateral damage to those living in Western countries. If the U.S. fully cuts off from Russia's oil supply, that will reduce the oil supply by roughly 3%, or 200,000 barrels per day, according to the American fuel and petroleum manufacturers. This could cause further spikes in the price of gas. As a result of supply chain issues, inflation, and the pandemic, gas prices in the U.S. have already spiked. Current gas prices are a national average of $3.60 a gallon. That's almost $1 more than $2.65 a gallon just a year ago. According to AAA, the record national average for gas is $4.11, achieved during the 2008 recession. Many analysts warned that the conflict in Ukraine could send this average soaring towards $5 per gallon nationally. For Americans already stretched thin from the pandemic, this could mean a choice between gas and other essentials. The problem in European countries is far worse. In 2020, the EU had a record high 96% of its oil imported from other countries. That's compared to just 37% that the United States imports. The EU imports 27% of that crude oil from Russia. Gas prices in Germany were $7.49 a gallon. That's much higher than the U.S., and that's a result of environmental regulations on oil and a higher reliance on imports. This means that sanctions on Russian oil could lead to a large shortage of gas in Europe and serious damages to their economy. Additionally, last week, Germany announced that it would freeze the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, a pipeline connecting Russia to Germany to deliver natural gas. The pipeline was going to double the flow of natural gas to Germany in an attempt to lower energy prices. But now that project has been halted and energy prices are expected to skyrocket in Germany. When we talk about oil specifically, we often just refer to gasoline used in cars, but petroleum and crude oil are used in many, many products, including jet fuel, rubber, wax, plastics, and generating electricity. So despite many analysts predicting that sanctions directly on Russian energy could be a major blow to Russia, its implications could prove too severe for the EU and the US to employ. Back to you at the desk, Jason.
Thanks, Max. While the United States and other Western countries have added new sanctions to Russian banks, the energy sector remains largely untouched. Chloe?
In just 2 minutes, Northwestern political science professor Karen Alter and former U.S. ambassador to Georgia and current Northwestern professor Ian Kelly join us for a special panel. We'll be right back.
Worried about your friend, but don't know how to reach out?
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could chat with them in VR, it's all good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health.
Whatever gets you talking.
Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Great having you. Incredible women. I wish they had those kind of cool careers for women when we were growing up.
So in this flashback, we're all the same age?
Yeah. What does everyone want to be when they grow up?
If I say 2 jobs, do I get extra credit?
No.
I want to make immersive video games. I want to revolutionize 3D printing. I want to analyze data from the cloud.
I want to be a meteor.
You mean meteorologist?
No.
That's great, Al. Follow your dreams.
For the record, I was a baby in the 70s.
Yo, camping buddy. Okay, you guys ready?
Dude, I thought you were driving.
I thought you were driving.
Oh, I never said I was driving. I definitely can't drive.
If you're high, just don't drive. It's illegal everywhere. If you feel different, you drive different.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
To break down where Russia is in the invasion with Ukraine, we're joined in the studio tonight by Northwestern political science professor Karen Alter, whose research focuses on the construction of global economic rules.
And also with us is U.S. Ambassador Ian Kelly, and he's also an ambassador in residence at Northwestern University, and he's the former U.S. ambassador to Georgia. Thank you both for joining us.
Yeah. So why don't we start with you, Professor Alter? What more should the U.S. be doing to address or quell this conflict right now?
I think President Biden is doing a very good job. He's incrementally ratcheting up the strategy in response to Putin's moves. So he wants Putin to be the first mover before the U.S. then responds, and with the idea that you would deter Putin from going further than he's already going. So I don't think that there's more that could be that should be done at this moment. If Putin starts to cause a lot of death and violence, I think that you'll try to ratchet things up, although he's already put in a lot of sanctions, so where you can go with this is not entirely clear.
And he's announced even more tonight as we speak during his State of the Union address.
He's made a lot of claims in the State of the Union.
Yeah.
I was only able to listen to a part of it. He said that they were going after the oligarchs and their assets. And I'm not entirely sure how they're going to do that. I know you freeze the assets, but how you then seize the assets in a way that they can't get them back, that will tie things up in courts for years to come.
Yeah, yeah. Ambassador Kelly, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Professor Alter. I think that we have already rolled out a very substantial package that we're already seeing the economic effects of this, of some of these actions, particularly the freezing of the country's foreign currency reserves, which I think Putin was looking to use to cushion the effects of sanctions on the banks. But there are more things that we could do, but the problem is the other things we can do would have a real effect on the world's economy, and that's not allowing the sale of Russian oil or gas.
And my next question to you, Professor Alter, in terms of the international response, do you think that President Biden and the leaders of other nations should be thinking about the implications of these economic sanctions on the everyday Russian people who will surely endure really severe economic hardship?
Eventually, yes, but at this moment, no. Eventually, when you're talking about lack of medicine, I don't think they'll have lack of food supplies. Then, yes, you're going to have to think about some chinks. But at this moment, I think the idea is to create a real shock on the Russian economy so that the ordinary Russians start to feel the consequences of their leaders' actions.
Yeah, and Germany has shifted from some of its traditional post-World War II stance of non-involvement in military conflict. It's helping to heavily arm Ukraine, and historically neutral Switzerland is even getting involved, considering freezing Russian assets, which I know we talked about freezing assets earlier. Is this the right move for these countries that want to usually remain neutral?
Well, I don't think that they're necessarily usually want to remain neutral. This is not a conflict between NATO and Russia. This is a conflict between the world and Russia that is violating the fundamental elements of a rules-based international order, that you should not invade other countries, and that you should not invade, especially on the pretense because you don't like the choices that the country is making for itself. That's not a premise that Putin would ever accept for himself, and nor can he foist that on others. So I think when you have this fundamental of a violation, to stay neutral, if you want to call it neutral, is really to pick the side of Russia, because I think it's pretty clear who's the aggressor is.
So are you saying that one is undeniably, well, you said one is undeniably breaking this international law, and so
I think there's no question that Russia is breaking international law. When you cross the border with tanks and military instruments and you start killing people and blowing up buildings, there's no question that that's a violation of international law. Now, the Russians would like to say that this is an exercise or a small incursion, and the Chinese are going out of their way to not call it an invasion because they're trying to lower the stakes of it. But I don't think there's any question anywhere that this is a violation of international law. It's quite akin to Saddam Hussein going into Kuwait.
Ambassador Kelly, do you have anything to add about what it means to remain neutral or what it means to take a side in this conflict?
Well, I think, we all woke up in a different world when Putin gave the order to invade last Thursday. I had kind of a reality bending experience when I read the speech of the German Chancellor, either on Saturday or Sunday, when he announced that they were going to send lethal weapons, quite lethal weapons, Stingers and anti-tank Javelin missiles to Russia, and doubled their military budget. And in a line, I think, which will be written in the history books, that by invading Ukraine, Putin, with that one act, really absolved Germany of its historical guilt in terms of taking sides in military actions. And then after that, you had Switzerland announce that they were going to join the sanctions. Switzerland has never done that, not even in World War II. They didn't sanction Adolf Hitler, but they did sanction Vladimir Putin. So, I don't think Putin anticipated, as Professor Alter said, that it would be Russia versus the world, because that's what it is right now.
And even though it is Russia versus the world right now, as you say, militarily, President Zelensky is up against a much larger army. He's outnumbered in terms of tanks, military aircraft, and foot soldiers as well. What should be the military strategy for Zelensky and the Ukrainians to hold out and keep their republic?
I think President Zelensky has been very clear that the Ukrainians are going to defend, every street, every square, every city, and I think his people really do have the bit between their teeth. They don't want to live in a under Putin, but I think that people have to recognize that if Russia wants to take over Ukraine, it certainly has the military power to do that. But it would be at a huge cost to Russia, to support for Putin, because to take over Ukrainian cities with the residents arming themselves with with rifles and Molotov cocktails, it's going to be a terrible, terrible tragedy. What Putin can't do, though, is occupy Ukraine. He can defeat Ukraine, but I don't think that he can impose a government on Ukraine. And that's, I think, where he's really miscalculated.
So
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kelly. Would you like to respond, Professor Alter?
I was going to jump in because when Ambassador Kelly said they couldn't occupy, I was thinking, well, Putin has said that he does not want to stay in the long term in Ukraine, and that's because it will be a disaster, and he knows that. It would be a tremendous amount of resources if it goes into long-scale guerrilla war. You're going to see a lot of Russian soldiers going back in body bags, which Russia has not experienced really for a very, very long time. And so he wants to get out as soon as he can. And the question is, how much damage does he do to Ukraine's infrastructure, to its people, before he gets out? And so he could do a lot of damage and then try to force a ceasefire on his terms and keep the Ukrainians so completely occupied with trying to rebuild their country and save lives. Unfortunately, I think that's a more likely scenario. But that is a scenario where Ukraine gets its country back. So it's all about how much you value being in charge of your own country.
Thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.
And coming up after the break, Northwestern students are put on the spot to find out what they think of the new mask guidance and a look at the history made on the Supreme Court this week from Washington, D.C. Don't go anywhere.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play, what you wear, how you dance, or even what direction life takes you. You just need to be there. You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back. Last week, Northwestern sent an email announcing that they intended to start lifting mask mandates for campus. This following the lifting of mask mandates in Illinois. The lifting of campus masking policies began yesterday, and I took to campus to ask students what they thought about the new COVID guidelines.
So, what do you think about those new guidelines?
I think that it's a little bit soon.
I think it's also a really bad decision since even if it is optional, already people don't really tend to mask, and now it's currently mandated.
I understand lifting the mask mandate sometime in the near future. I do think we still have a lot of cases on campus, so I don't know if right now is the time to do it.
I also thought since we're a private institution that we could kind of do masking however we want regardless of what Chicago's doing.
So I was shocked to find out that we would be unmasking.
I feel like there's COVID still going around on campus, so that would be one reason why we should still have masks. But then in the same time, like I feel like everyone outside and also like in social settings anyway doesn't really wear a mask. So if we don't wear a mask indoors, it's not going to make that big of a difference.
Have you yourself had COVID yet?
I have. Yeah.
So do you think that brings you an additional sense of calm going into this?
Honestly, yeah, definitely. I feel like it definitely gives me a little better sense, but I'm also aware of that, and there are definitely people that have not had COVID and are a little more concerned, which is very valid.
If I've had COVID before, I would finally be like, okay, like I'm fine with it. But as someone who hasn't had COVID before, I'm kind of like skeptical about it.
You're still going to continue wearing your mask in places where you might not have to?
I would say probably, at least for now.
I'll probably be more cautious. I might double up again.
Double up your masks?
Yeah.
I'll definitely feel less safe.
Yeah.
Northwestern also said that in the weeks to come, they would reevaluate their plans for spring quarter.
Between Russian doping scandals and China's long record of human rights violations, the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics has had its fair share of controversies. One Northwestern political union member, Junior Zach Laurie, wrote a blog post arguing that the Summer and Winter Olympics should be made permanent in a permanent location because of environmental, economic, and political costs. And I spoke to Zach Laurie just yesterday on the issue.
The problem with the Olympics is that, well, one of the problems is that you have to build so much new infrastructure and stuff. Sometimes they temporarily build it, but even that costs a lot of money.
He also said getting the games in a smaller, relatively neutral country would help avoid geopolitical controversy.
President Biden announced Friday that he would nominate Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. If confirmed, she would make history as the court's first black woman to be a Supreme Court justice. Politicat's Julia Richardson reports on this historic nomination from Washington, D.C.
When I say courts, you say matter. Courts matter. Courts matter.
A historic announcement yesterday morning. Ketanji Brown Jackson becoming the first black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court.
I want to reiterate, she is not the first black woman qualified to do the job. She is the first black woman with the opportunity to do the job.
Several saying they were overjoyed to hear the news.
I was in absolute awe, and oh my gosh, it was so much excitement and so much joy.
Very happy, very emotional. It's just been long awaited.
Oh, I was overjoyed.
And that this moment is long overdue.
For over 200 years, the course itself never reflected what America looks like.
People of all ages coming together to celebrate and to push for Jackson's confirmation.
Confirm her swiftly, because she's ready and we're ready.
Cherie Pendleton came with her 2 daughters. She says Jackson's nomination makes her hopeful for their futures.
It means that my daughters can be anything. They have the representation in the highest court of the land, which means a lot.
Howard sophomores Kimora and Juliana say they are inspired and hope to follow in Jackson's footsteps.
My goal is eventually to become a lawyer and eventually a judge, and it's just so inspiring to have someone who looks like me sit at the highest court of our land.
And organizers say they are ready to take steps in the coming months to secure Jackson's place on the court.
This is just mobilizing our activists, our members, and making sure people understand her story and understand what a difference she, and frankly women like her, make on our courts.
And although the work is not done, it is progress.
I had a chance to work for the first black president. We have a black vice president. We are now going to have a nominee who is a black woman for Supreme Court justice, and I think that's what progress looks like in America.
Julia Richardson, Medill News Service.
Thank you, Julia, for that excellent report from DC. It's some much needed positive news.
That's all the time we have for tonight. For Politicat, I'm Jason Bieferman.
And I'm Chloe Cope. Thank you so much for watching this special edition of Politicat. Before you go, President President Biden's State of the Union address happened tonight, so tune into your local station to hear his speech and some excellent reporting on it. He was expected to discuss Ukraine and the pandemic, and I'm excited to see what he says. Stay safe and stay informed. We'll be back next quarter. Good night.